Hey, it's Andrew, and I'm here to bring you some Logos goodness in Keyforge Age of Ascension. And I'm pretty excited to talk through Logos because I feel like they're so they're quite different in AOA than they were in Call of the Archons, and I think strong in very different ways. And I've recently opened up a bunch of decks with them and got to play with them more. So yeah, I've just been having a good time with them. And Logos is so weird in Age of Ascension because I don't get super excited about what I can do in Logos so much as the ways that they're going to let my other houses shine. And so that's just been really interesting. Now, we'll start with, I have my 5 questions that I'm working through, and then the first card that we'll get to really cover in depth is Archimedes, and that's going to be a fun one. That's been fun in the community lately. So let's start by walking through my 5 questions, and the first one is, when I open a deck of in Age of Ascension and I see Logos, what am I looking for? And I'm primarily looking for deck manipulation effects. So this would include card draw. This also includes archive, and there's a lot more archive in Logos and Age of Ascension than there was in Call of the Archons. So I'm really now looking for a lot of archive. I'm hoping to get a lot of archive effects. Yeah, still some draw as well. Some combo enablers. In Call of the Archons, we of course had Phase Shift, Wild Wormhole. Here we have Helper Bot instead of Phase Shift, but still a very good combo enabler. And there's some other interesting stuff as well, like the Curator, which makes artifacts interplay ready. There's the Scientifical Hack, which lets you use out-of-house artifacts, which is kind of a cool effect. And there's some other cool stuff in there too, some really great combo enablers. There are a lot of straight-up destruction effects in Logos, both for artifacts and for creatures. There's actually less direct damage. I went back and in the Logos video that Mark and I did for Call of the Archons, I don't think we focused a lot on the direct damage that you get in Logos, but I feel like there was quite a bit of it, and maybe I feel that way because of the lack of it here. But we had Twin Bolt Emission as well as Positron Bolt, and so your chances of being able to deal with small annoying creatures, you had a good chance of being able to do that in Logos, whereas now those are gone, and what we have is Poke, which doesn't do as much for that. There's still cards, again, like I said, a lot of straight up destruction effects. So if you can use those, then you can still get a lot of have a lot of ability to deal with annoying stuff. All right. So who would I like to see next to Logos? I'm pretty happy with anybody, but I really like seeing Shadows next to Logos because a lot of Shadows cards effects care when they fire. I think they're the house where timing matters the most. And so having the ability to stash stuff for later is quite powerful with Shadows, and Logos gives you that ability. Of course, that benefits a lot of other houses as well, but I think it maybe benefits Shadows even more than other houses. What's the combo that I'd most like to see? I went for a non-obvious one, and for a couple reasons. Number one, I think there are a lot of combos I could list that are just good cards with other good cards, and also there are some that are obvious. And so the first card I'm going to mention is Project ZYX, and Project ZYX is a rare, but it's very obviously paired with Director, of ZYX, yeah, and ZYX Researcher. So there's a thematic tie-in there, and as well as a mechanical tie-in. But I went with Titan Librarian instead for the other part of the combo. And Project ZYX is just good with things that archive. And I went with Titan Librarian because it's not so obviously thematically tied. And also because it's fantastic. I mean, with Titan Librarian, at the end of one turn, I can archive a card. And then if I do go Logos on the next turn, then I can use Project ZYX to be able to play that card out of my archives. So it's a good way to set up my next turn with a non-Logos card in a way that, you know, I could maybe get out of like a Helper Bot, for example. But I have that persistent ability to do that with Project ZYX. So I thought that was an interesting thing. I haven't seen that happen. I haven't gotten a deck with Project ZYX yet, unfortunately. I would love to. It's a cool card. But that seems like it would be a fun combo. What would I most like to get as a Maverick? And I thought about this one quite a bit as well. There are a lot of just generically good cards that I would love to see. But then I tried to think about what I think is really missing in Logos, and the most frustrating thing in Logos in Age of Ascension, from my perspective, is problems dealing with Amber control. Binate Rupture can be a really cool effect if you time it right and can burst your own Amber without feeding your opponent too much. But if you are in a place where you want to use it, but it will also help your opponent, what do? Well, maybe you have Cutthroat Research, but the best that can do is drop them down to 6. So now we might be okay if we got a card that increases Amber cost, but I thought, hey, why not go for just a card that'll straight up deal with it, and that's Gatekeeper. So yeah, I would love to see a Maverick Gatekeeper next to like Binate Rupture, or just in Logos generally, because like, again, it solves a problem that Logos has. And maybe you can, you know, I think the idea of a Maverick and Logos is less exciting for me anyway, because cards like Helper Bot give you options for playing non-Logos cards on your Logos turn anyway. But yeah, if I could have a Logos Maverick, I think I'd want Gatekeeper. And as far as a Legacy card, I put 2 here. The first one, I was looking through the Call of the Archons cards and thinking, what would I love to see again? And the one that stuck out was Scrambler Storm, again, because it does something that is really useful and isn't in this set, and that is prevent your opponent from playing actions on their next turn. And then maybe like a Skippy Time Hog. I would love to see that too. Different, you know, cool prevent effect. I was noticing one card, I'll mention it when it comes up, but I was noticing one card that says your opponent can't blah blah blah, and I thought, wow, that's not Logos-y. But then I remembered Scrambler Storm and Skippy Time Hog already do that. So there is some precedent for doing that in Logos, although it's much stronger in Dees. Okay, so with all that covered, let's go ahead and dig in on the cards. So the first card we have in front of us here is Archimedes, and Archimedes is a 2-power elusive cyborg beast, and each of Archimedes' neighbors gains destroyed, archive this creature. Quick, like, just fun flavor note, if you didn't know, Archimedes is Merlin's pet owl in The Sword in the Stone. So, which is a book. I haven't read the book, but I grew up watching the classic Disney animated movie. And anyway, so there he is. This effect had some fun times in community discussion, and I kind of still want to do a separate video walking through my current understanding of it. But basically it was ruled that if Archimedes is on the board, if I have Archimedes on the board and a few creatures out, and my opponent plays a board wipe effect, like let's say a Gateway to Dees, it's going to destroy, or if I do it, either way, if someone does this, all the creatures are destroyed simultaneously, But because of the way that destroyed triggers work, uh, Archimedes' neighbors have their destroyed abilities that Archimedes gave them trigger, and they go to archives. And then the battle line closes in, and the new neighbors get that effect as well, and then get archived, and so on and so forth. So basically, all the creatures on my side of the board are going to end up in my archives, except for Archimedes, who will still go to the discard pile. Anyway, some people are upset about that. I think it's fine, and actually, like, it's just not. It's not something that's going to happen a lot. So it would be really cool to have it happen, but I don't think it's something that's going to happen a lot. And I think in Archon events, people are probably going to be bringing decks with some spot damage or spot destroy. So I would expect that Archimedes gets killed. So, but if you're new to the game, I know that might sound, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. Just don't worry about it too much. It's not that likely to happen. But do know that, yeah, if there's a board wipe, if a bunch of creatures are destroyed simultaneously, then Archimedes' neighbors get archived before the destruction finishes, and then if Archimedes has new neighbors, they also get the destroyed effect and get archived. But even aside from that, I just love Archimedes as a card. Like, it's a fantastic card. I was already doing stuff like with Bouncing Death Quark. Those destructions are not simultaneous, so you can plink stuff back into your archives while destroying opponents' cards. You can, just put. I love to put things next to Archimedes, like Arani Wrist Clocks, maybe. That then I can bash into something, and it goes in my archives, and I can get another steal effect. So there's just cool stuff you can do there. Yeah, it's a great card, even without the board wipe thing, which again I don't think is going to happen that much. I love Archimedes. Okay. Binate Rupture. This one's harder to use, and I'm kind of surprised this is a common just because it's a harder card to use well. So Binate Rupture is an action that has alpha, which means you can only play it if you haven't done anything else on the step, which is step 3, which is where you play, use, and discard cards. So you have to play this first thing. If you have 2 of them, you can't use both of them in the same turn. And when you play it, each player gains amber equal to the amber in their pool, so effectively doubling each player's amber. So the very obvious time when you would want to use this is, let's say I start a turn with 5 amber, my opponent has 1, I play this, now I'm at 10, they're at 2. That's a big win for me. Otherwise, I think you can get good value out of this with some other cards that can make, play that off to your benefit. People have been using this with Interdimensional Graft to, maybe your opponent has 7 because they're looking to forge on their next turn, and you just burst them up to 14, and then play Interdimensional Graft so that you'll get everything that's left over. So there's some interesting combos that can work out there. But mostly it's about getting it at the right time. Luckily, you're in Logos, so if you get it at the wrong time, you can probably archive it. I've definitely had situations where this just ended up getting discarded because it wouldn't have helped. It's best if you're ahead and you can just use it to stay ahead. All right. Next up, we have Cutthroat Research. It's an action that with a bonus amber, and then you steal 2 amber if your opponent has 8 or more. That's cool. I mean, if your opponent has 8, getting to steal 2 is fantastic. It's a little disappointing because it's not a way to keep them away from forging unless you have something increasing key cost. You might, have a couple of these in your hand and Binate Rupture and burst your opponent up and then steal away from them immediately. That can be a cool effect. So definitely some opportunities to get good value out of this. It's just a little disappointing because it can't keep somebody off of forging. And compared to a card from Call the Archons, Neurosiphon, which could steal one and actually prevent your opponent from forging. I think, this is probably a little less powerful in the big picture. Igor, this is a really good deck. Cycling Enabler is a 2-power creature, and when you play it, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, you add 1 to your hand, you discard the others. That's fantastic. There's a really good chance that one of those is Logos. I'm just going to be able to get immediate value. And yeah, there's a really good chance there. And if not, then I can pick a powerful card to have for later and get rid of a couple things that just wouldn't have been the best, right? By the way, cards like this that have nice play effects are great neighbors for Archimedes, because you can use them to go, fight something or whatnot, and then they get re-archived, so you can play them again for that powerful effect. So that's a fun little situation there if you can keep Archimedes on the board. Similarly with Helperbot. So Helperbot is the creature version of Phase Shift. So Phase Shift is out, Helperbot is in. It's a 1-power robot creature, and when you play it, it says you can play 1 non-Logos card this turn. Yeah, and that's a fantastic effect. And Helperbot is very interesting in that there are there are more cards that recur creatures. By that I mean that get creatures back from your discard pile. So the chances that you have something in your deck that can put Helperbot back and you get to use it again later, those chances are pretty high, which is fun. And even, again, put it next to Archimedes, bash it into something, you can use it again later. Hexbion is a 2-power creature that when it's destroyed, archives itself and the top card of your deck. That's pretty cool. It's like a better Research Smoko, really. Lab Work is back from Call of the Archons. It has 1 bonus amber, and when you play it, you archive a card. Pretty straightforward. Library Babel, also back from Call of the Archons. It's an artifact that exhausts to draw a card. Pip Pip is a 2-power creature. It's a human scientist, and it says after an enemy creature reaps, stun it. I love the artwork on Pip Pip. I am not in love with the effect. I like, oh man, all the creatures get stunned when they reap effects tire me out a little bit, but it is a strong effect if you can keep this on the board, and yeah, slows your opponent down a bit. Poke is the 1 direct damage card in Logos in this set. Has a bonus amber, you deal 1 damage to a creature, and if this damage destroys that creature, you draw a card. If you get the card draw off of it, fantastic. I've really had trouble getting it to fire off. Professor Sutterkin has a really powerful ability, and therefore probably is going to be high priority for your opponent to murder. He has 2 power, and the reap effect, no elusive or anything, so it is hard to keep this on the board. But when Professor Sutterkin reaps, you draw a card for each friendly Logos creature. And that can be really cool. I mean, if you have 3 Logos creatures on the board, reap, draw 3 cards, that's a fantastic effect. Standardized testing is an action that when you play it, you destroy each creature with the lowest power and each creature with the highest power. My experience is that the lowest power is usually 2, sometimes it's 1, usually it's 2, and I've often been able to fire this off and kill a lot of power 2 creatures, sometimes including my own. But in Logos, there's a good chance that they have, effects that either play effects and they get archived, or they have a destroyed effect, Hexbion. So usually it works out pretty decently. And each creature with the highest power, so this is a good way to deal with Lollups or Tunks or Zorgs, big things like that. Titan Librarian is, yeah, one of my favorite cards in the new Logos. It's power 4, and it says at the end of your turn, if Titan Librarian is not on a flank, archive a card. And yeah, that's a really powerful effect, getting to just archive once a turn, and it doesn't have to be on a Logos turn. As long as this stays in the middle of your battle line, you get this on other turns as well. One important nuance here is this happens at the end of your turn, which is after you draw up to 6 cards. So drawing up to 6 cards happens in, I believe it's step 5. Step 4 is everything unexhaust. Step 5 is you draw up to 6 cards. I might have those backwards. Anyway, those happen, and then your turn ends. So Titan Librarian happens at the end of that, which means if you drew up to 6, then you're going to use Titan Librarian to archive a card. Now you're at 5, and you don't draw more. You stay at 5. So just important to understand the ordering there. Titan Mechanic is 6 power, and while Titan Mechanic is on a flank, each key costs 1 less, yours and your opponent's, and of course this is back from Call of the Archons. So yes, this applies to your keys and your opponent's keys, so you have to be careful with it. While Wormhole is an action back from Call of the Archons, has a bonus amber. Oops, what happened there? Has a bonus amber, and when you play it, you play the top card of your deck. Nuance here, if for some reason you can't play that card, let's say, turns out it has alpha, or it's a Khalifi dragon, and you don't have 7 amber, then it just goes back on top of your deck. It doesn't get discarded. But ideally, you get to play the top card of your deck, and that's a pretty fantastic effect. ZYX Researcher is a 2-power human scientist who has the play effect, archive the top card of your deck or the top card of your discard pile. And so if you can, kind of organize your play cleverly so that you have a powerful card on top of your discard pile, then that is fantastic. Otherwise, just archiving the top card of your deck is great as well. And this is I love seeing this card. I'm very happy to, anytime I get the Researcher. All right, here we go on to the uncommons. So first of all, we have Backup Copy, which is the first upgrade we've seen in Logos so far. Backup Copy has a bonus amber, and the creature it's attached to gains destroyed. Put this creature on top of your deck. So this basically turns any creature into Dexter, and the flavor text is even Dexter. Again, things with strong play effects are pretty good targets for this, whether they're in Logos or in some other house. And you maybe, if you don't have something with a strong play effect, then putting it on just another generally good card is fine. Importantly, if you end up with a creature having multiple destroyed effects, like let's say you put Backup Copy on a card and then later on it ends up being a neighbor of Archimedes, then when it's destroyed, the active player gets to decide which of those fires first, which means if it's your turn, you could say, oh, I'd rather this go to my archives than on top of my deck. If it's your opponent's turn, they get to say, oh no, I'm going to put it on top of your deck or whatever. That's probably what they prefer. In that particular situation. But yeah, the active player gets to decide which thing triggers first. And of course, once it's gone to an out of play area, then the other thing won't trigger. All right, now we have Balancing Deathquark, which is returning from Call of the Archons. It's an action that will destroy an enemy creature and a friendly creature. And then you may repeat this effect as many times as you like, as long as it is possible to repeat the entire effect. So, if I have 3 creatures and my opponent has 4 creatures, and I play this card, first I must destroy one of my creatures and one of their creatures. Then, if there's still a trade-off that I think would be to my benefit, then I can choose to destroy another of their creatures and of my creatures. And then, if there's another I think that there's another trade-off that would be good. I make that. Once I run out of creatures, I can't trigger it anymore. And similarly, if they're out of creatures, I can't trigger this anymore. Now, if they have, let's say they have 4 creatures and I have no creatures, well, I can still play this and I will destroy 1 enemy creature, because that first, that initial time that this happens is not conditional. It's also not a may. So I can definitely destroy 1 of their creatures. Yeah, and people get tripped up by this sort of thing sometimes. Looping through an effect like this, it has nothing to do with the rule of 6. The rule of 6 is counting how many times you play or use the same card. So, for example, if I have a Dusk Witch on the board and I have a Sky Booster Squadron, I play it from my hand, it comes into play ready, I reap with it, gain an amber, it returns to my hand. I played it once, I used it once, that's 2. I can play it and use it again, that's 4, I've gained 2 amber. I can play it and use it again, that's 6. I've gained 3 amber. I actually can't play Sky Booster from my hand again at that point. So good to understand how that works. Anyway, but it has nothing to do with bouncing Death Quirk, because this is not, you're not playing or using a card in this scenario. Well, you're playing a card, but you're playing it once. All right. Brain Eater also returning. It's a 6-power cyborg beast, and after a creature is destroyed, fighting Brain Eater, which can mean that Brain Eater attacked or that Brain Eater was attacked. But if a creature is destroyed fighting Brain Eater, you draw a card. And then we have Director of ZYX, who is 3-power and a cyborg scientist. I like how the ZYX researcher is a lowly human, but the director is a cyborg. So it gets more robotic as it progresses through the ranks. And then this thing has elusive, so it's more likely to stay on the board. And at the start of your turn, archive the top card of your deck. Timing's important here too. This happens before, so step 1 is forge a key, right? But this happens before that, because this is at the start of your turn. So when your turn starts, you would first archive the top card of your deck, then forge a key if you can. Then you choose your active house, and it's during that step 2, choose your active house, that is when you can choose to return your archives to your hand. So if you like the card that goes in from Director, you can choose to pull it into your hand. Oops. Wait, did I miss one? Okay, no. All right. Eureka, very strong card here. It's an action. It's a little funny the way it's printed, because it gives you a bonus amber, but it also says play and gain 2 amber. So when you play it, you get 3 amber. And then you archive 2 random cards from your hand, which can be quite powerful. Sometimes if you had other Logos cards, it ends up being a bummer, but it can be quite good. It has alpha, so you have to do this before you do anything else, which means you can't like play the Logos cards out of your hand and then play this and archive 2 random cards that are left. You have to play this first thing. So just important to know that. This would trigger after Director of ZYX, because that happens at the start of your turn, and Eureka just has to be the first thing you do in step 3. And the fact that it's alpha also means that you couldn't play 2 of this, you can't play this and Binate Rupture. Yeah, okay. This is a really nice card to get in your hand if you are the first player and you get this in your hand on turn 1. You can only play 1 card anyway. So gain 3 amber, archive 2 random cards from your hand. That is fantastic. Next we have Phila the Researcher. And she's a 1-power human scientist with elusive, and after a creature is played adjacent to Phila, draw a card. Usually you're going to get 1 or 2 triggers off of this. If you have cards with deploy, then maybe you get more draws out of it, but I'm never sad to get a draw. It's not a super powerful card, but it can be good if you can get those triggers off a bunch. Next, we have Interdimensional Graft, which is an action card that gains you a bonus amber, and then says if your opponent forges a key on their next turn, they must give you their remaining amber. Interestingly, with cards like this that have an effect that lasts like that, they still go in your discard pile after you play them. So you just have to remember that sort of thing. So just important note there. Yeah, this can be quite good. People get real excited about comboing this with Binate Rupture, and yeah, that absolutely can be good. I don't know how long I'd sit around waiting for that combo. I haven't seen it be overwhelming, to be honest, but maybe it'll turn out different than I think. Sometimes things do. Okay, next we have Jargoggle, who is a 2-powered beast and mutant. He has elusive, and when you play Jargoggle, you put a card from your hand face down under it. So very similar to Master Plan. But when you play Jargoggle, you're going to place a card from your hand face down under Jargoggle, and then when Jargoggle is destroyed, if it is your turn, you play that card, regardless of what house it's from. So this, factors into what I said about logos being a combo enabler. You could have a cool combo that you pull off this way. If it is not your turn, then that card gets archived, which I think makes perfect sense. You don't get to play one of your cards on your opponent's turn. You do get to still have it for later, which is good. All right. Then we have Memory Chip, which is an artifact that says after you choose Logos as your active house, you archive a card. That's a strong effect. That's cool. And that would be in step 2, so it would be really immediately before. This would happen, I guess it would have the same timing point as pulling your archives up. So maybe you get to choose which happens first, but I'm not super confident about that. I think you probably do get to, if you want to pull your archives, you could do that first and then archive something, but don't quote me. Then we have Quantum Finger Trap, which is an artifact with a bonus amber that can exhaust to swap the positions of 2 creatures in a battle line. This is especially relevant. This is actually more relevant in this set than it was in the last set, because in Age of Ascension, there's a lot more creatures that care where they are in the battle line, and this lets you mess that up for people, which is great. Remote Access is back, also from Call of the Archons. It is an action with a bonus amber, and it says use an opponent's artifact as if it were yours. There's been some controversy over whether that means you can sacrifice their artifact, and since the condition for being able to sacrifice an artifact is that you control it, and this, as if it were yours, effectively means as if you controlled it. I do think, yeah, you do get to. That's pretty settled, but some people were confused by it. So yes, you do get to sacrifice your opponent's, Omni artifacts with this. I feel like there's a lot more powerful artifacts in this set that don't care about exhausting, that don't need to be used, and so that's kind of, I would say, a slight downside. This is maybe a little not quite as good in this set, but against Call of the Archons, it's still very good, and there are good things. Another important note is if you use this against an opponent's shard, it still counts how many shards you have, not how many shards they have. So you're not going to get, if they have 3 shards out, you're not going to get the benefit of 3 shards, unfortunately. Then we have Research Smoko back from Coda, 2-power mutant, and when it's destroyed, you archive the top card of your deck. Rocket Boot's also returning. It's an upgrade that gives a creature Fight or Reap if it's the first time that creature has used this turn, ready it. That can be quite good depending on the situation and what you get to put it on. Seismo Entangler is an artifact that exhausts and you choose a house, and during your opponent's next turn, creatures of the chosen house cannot be used to reap. That is, I mean, that's pretty powerful. This is a great way to, your opponent was setting up for a really good turn, and you just say, nope, you don't get to have a really good turn. Yeah, I think that's pretty powerful. And the fact that it's an artifact and going to be hard to deal with, to get rid of, makes it that much better. And that's the card I mentioned, by the way, in relation to Scrambler Storm and Skippy Time Hog. I was thinking, wow, why does Logos have a card that says your opponent can't do something? But there are a couple cards like that in Coda as well. Sloppy Lab Work is a better version of Lab Work because it has the bonus Amber still. You archive a card and then you get to discard a card. And you might say, oh, but discard a card. Why would I want to do that? It's so good, because it's an opportunity cost. And if you are choosing to discard the worst card in your hand in order to get a random card from your deck, it's probably a good trade. Because you have control of it. All right. So we are out of common and uncommon now, and we are into rare. And we're going to start with Redacted, which is the new key cheat card in Logos. Oh, by the way, really weird, interesting thing I noticed. I only noticed this just now when prepping for this video. In Uncommons, we covered 15 cards. And that's weird because in Coda, every house had 16 commons and 16 uncommons. In AOA, Logos only has 15 uncommons, and then still 20 rares, and then the one, 20, yeah, 20 rares. So, and the one special rare. So that's just an interesting little hiccup that I hadn't noticed until just now, that there's only 15 uncommons in Logos. If somebody, notices something I missed, please let me know. I'd love to know what I missed. All right, so Redacted is an artifact, and this is, again, one of those ones I was mentioning. It doesn't exhaust to do anything crazy, but it does do something quite crazy if you pull it off. After you choose Logos as your active house, you put an Amber from the common supply on Redacted, and when there are 4 or more Amber on it, you sacrifice it and forge a key at no cost. That is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, that's a great effect. People have pointed out it's maybe hard to trigger this reliably because you maybe aren't that likely to actually choose Logos 5 times over the course of a game. That's kind of a big thing to ask for, and that would imply that you have this in your opening hand almost. So the chances that this fires are pretty slim, but it could happen, and it's cool if it does. So, don't complain. And it puts pressure on. It's a good way to put pressure on. All right, Chaos Portal is an artifact that exhausts. This is back from Coda, like 60% of the artifacts are going to be. You exhaust it, you choose a house, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is of that house, play it. It can lead to some pretty cool, crazy situations. Speaking of crazy, we have Crazy Killing Machine is back. It's an artifact that exhausts to discard the top card of each player's deck, and for each of those cards, destroy a creature or artifact of that card's house if you're able. If 2 cards are not destroyed as a result of that, you destroy the Crazy Killing Machine. It's a cool effect. Dysania is back. It's a 4-power mutant that has the play effect: your opponent discards each of their archived cards. You gain an Amber for each card discarded this way. This is, I think, better in this set than it was in Coda, or it's better against AOA than it is against Coda, because Logos and AOA has so many archive effects, and Mars has more archive effects as well. So even Shadows, I think, has more. Do they have? Yeah. So there's just more archive going on. So Dysania is better. Entropic Swirl is an action that says you choose a creature, and for each trait that creature has, deal it 2 damage and gain an Amber. Most creatures have like 1 or 2 traits. I'm trying to think if there's one with 3. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it probably exists. Fetch Drones is an artifact that exhausts to discard the top 2 cards of your deck, and for each Logos card discarded this way, a friendly creature captures 2 amber. That is actually, so I mentioned there being not a lot of amber control in Logos. This adds a little bit, which it can be nice. It's unreliable. But if you have this on the board, you're probably not sad, right? I've had turns where I had like a ZYX Researcher in my hand. Use this. If the second card discarded is one I really wanted, I can fetch it back into my archives with the ZYX Researcher. If I got some capture, then great. So there's some cool stuff that can happen. Harlan Mindlock is back. It's a 1-power cyborg scientist that when it's played takes control of an enemy flank creature until Harlan Mindlock leaves play. This dies to poke. It dies to a lot of things, but if you can, fire it off and get value out of it, then it's pretty cool. Help from Future Self is a special rare that goes along with Time Traveler, so I guess we'll skip ahead to Time Traveler first. Time Traveler is a 2-power human scientist that has a bonus amber, and when you play him, you draw 2 cards, and he can exhaust to shuffle himself back into your deck. Why would you want to do that? Well, because getting to draw him later and get the bonus amber and draw 2 more cards is probably better than reaping. Help from Future Self is an action that gains you a bonus amber, searches your deck and discard pile for a Time Traveler, reveals it, puts it in your hand, and then shuffles your discard pile into your deck. So it's a fun combo. Having 2 of them can be super crazy. There's a Coda Vault Tour deck that won an Archon, kind of fueled by 2 Time Travelers. It had Shadows as well as Mars, but it was really Time Traveler providing the fuel that kept that deck moving forward. Knowledge is Power is an action that when you play it, you choose one. You either archive a card, or if you have a bunch of archived cards, you can gain 1 per archived card. So it's good either way. Either way is fine. And that is also returning. Master the Theory is new. It's an action that gains you a bonus amber, and then if there are no friendly creatures in play, you may archive a card for each enemy creature. I don't like this card. I mean, if it gives you a benefit other than the amber, then you're probably losing. So I feel bad about it, but maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like it's in the situation where it's really useful. I'm probably already doing really poorly, and it's not enough to help. Neutron Shark is a 1-power beast and mutant back from Coda that has a play, fight, and reap effect. So after you play it, after it fights, or after it reaps, you destroy an enemy creature or artifact and a friendly creature or artifact. Notice this is artifact destruction, which is pretty crazy. And then you discard the top card of your deck, and if that card is not Logos, you trigger it again. So you have a roughly 2/3 chance of firing Neutron Shark again. So that is pretty crazy. Yeah, and it's a fun. This is a fun card. I like Logos has a lot of randomness built into them. Play the top card of your deck, archive the top card of your deck, discard cards, and do something based on them. And this is just a great example of that. Osmo Martianologist is back. It's a 2-power human scientist with elusive that on fight or reap heals 3 damage from a Mars creature or stuns a Mars creature. And it's not great. I don't love it, but it could be good, I guess. Honestly, it's really hard to imagine just being thrilled to have this. Probably the stun an enemy Mars creature is the best option you're going to get out of it, but I don't think it's that good. Pocket Universe is an artifact that you can exhaust to move an amber from your pool to Pocket Universe where it can't be captured or stolen, so that's cool. And you can spend amber on Pocket Universe when you're forging keys. That's also cool. This is this can be good if your opponent has cards that care about how much amber you have. So like, or cards that will reduce you to 5. So if your opponent has like a Doorstep to Heaven, they have Gatekeeper, they have maybe, you know, Ronnie, they have Cutthroat Research, you know, then this can be a good card. But you know, I'm never thrilled by it, and I'm never particularly concerned about it if my opponent has one. And if you have artifact destruction effects, then if your opponent has artifact destruction effects, I guess I should say, then this becomes kind of a liability, because if you put amber on it and this gets destroyed, the amber's just gone. So kind of iffy. Okay, next we have Project ZYX, which I haven't opened one yet, but I'm so excited about it. It's a 5-power cyborg mutant with 1 armor that has a fight or reap effect that you can play one of your archive cards as if it were in your hand and in the active house. That is super cool. That means if you like, now if you have this with Mars and you archived one of your opponent's creatures through Mars shenanigans, you can play it with Project ZYX. If you know, and then of course in Logos you have a ton of archive effects, so you're probably archiving cards, and this lets you play them even if they aren't of the active house. So just really, really cool stuff that you can do with this. Obviously, assuming it stays on the board. Yeah, I would be thrilled to get a copy of this in the deck. It's a great, great card. Seems like. Replicator is back. It's a 2-power mutant that on reap triggers the reap effect of another creature in play as if you controlled that creature, but you aren't actually using that creature. It's just that Replicator does the ability of that creature. Schematic, right? This is pretty cool. Yeah, I haven't gotten like great value out of one of these ever, but it has cool potential. Scientifical Hack is a new artifact that has a bonus amber, and Omni, sacrifice Scientifical Hack. For the remainder of the turn, you may use friendly artifacts as if they belong to the active house. That can be pretty cool. The fact that it's Omni means you can use your Logos artifacts on a different turn, or obviously you can use your other houses artifacts on a Logos turn. Whatever. It's a cool, cool effect. Then we have the Shard of Knowledge, which is an artifact that, so this is the shard in Logos. Every house has a shard, and if you get a shard, you're guaranteed to get at least a second one, but some decks have 3, which is pretty cool. And if you, so when you use the Shard of Knowledge, you draw a card for each friendly shard, which, you know, if you have 3 shards, that means you draw 3 cards, which is I mean, that's fantastic. It's like a triple library of Babel. At that point. And you know, if my opponent has 3 shards, it's very often that if I have some sort of artifact destruction effect, I'm going to be getting rid of their shards, because but this, you know, this one, like, at its worst is as good as a Library of Babel, so it's not bad, even if you destroy the other shards. But yeah, it's good. Okay. Then we have Strange Gizmo, which is back. Strange Gizmo has a bonus amber, and after you forge a key, destroy each creature and artifact. That is kind of bonkers. I was talking to somebody who has this in a deck with Martian Generosity and Key Abduction. That's crazy. If you can pull that off, you know, have this on the board, do the Martian Generosity into Key Abduction, wipe the board while forging a key for free. Oh my gosh, and you pulled your Mars creatures off. That's crazy. But even so, you know, I've had mixed results with this. It really depends on the deck, because it destroys everything. Sometimes it's not really what you would want, right? So you gotta, and the hardest part, I think, is sometimes you have to play it at a time where you're not sure if you're going to want it when it's time to trigger. So it's a little rough that way, but can be cool. So and it's definitely again like just a fun, crazy card that I like to see. The curator is a 3-power human scientist who says that friendly artifacts enter play ready. That can be pretty strong. It obviously depends on what artifacts you have, but that's pretty strong, and it's not as strong as Duskwitch because artifacts aren't as plentiful as creatures, but it is, and that's why it doesn't have Omega, and it has 3 power, but it is quite strong, and I'm excited about maybe trying to get this to do some good work. I have one deck with this so far. And then lastly, we end on a returning card from Coda. Transposition Sandals is an upgrade with 1 bonus amber, and the creature it's attached to gains the action swap this creature with another friendly creature in the battle line. You may use that creature this turn. So it sort of turns a creature into something that can omni something else, which is kind of a cool ability. I haven't ever been able to get fantastic usage out of this, but there are some cool things you could do with it. And again, this factors into the idea of Logos being a combo enabler. So that's it for Logos in Age of Ascension. I've been really enjoying decks with them. Again, I just feel like Logos makes whatever else I'm playing better because they speed up the deck. They let me have power turns. I don't know that I've opened a single helper bot yet, which is kind of crazy. So I'm hoping to get some more of those. Maybe in the sealed event I do today, I'll get some helper bots. Who knows? But yeah, that's that. I hope you enjoyed this video, that it helped you maybe. And if you did like this and you want more, go find, I've already done Mars and Shadows in Age of Ascension. I did all the cards from Call of the Archons, and I'll be doing the remaining 4 houses in Age of Ascension coming up before too long. So thanks for watching, and keep on forging keys.